Slurpty Derp, volume 3968. Have you got any sort of, you know, elements to your stomach that have not been eroded by the acidity of the caffeine? I'm not sure. That's up to you. Anyway, I've got a little sneaky peek into my last release project, Eremite. This is the final pre-master version. So what I do is I always save my projects as new versions, and then I tend to call the last one the final pre-master. And what I'll do is you can see it's at -4 there. But what I'll do is I'll tend to bounce out my final pre-master like at -4 or something around that, and then I'll go on and master it in a separate project, right at the end. But I thought we could just have a little look over the composition today. And if you look, I've closed all the groups. I'm not going to open them all because it's going to be a bit too chaotic, and it will end up being a much longer video. But there's sort of 34 channels in the end, and it was a big project. You can tell there's a lot of detail in the track, and there's a lot of sounds sort of happening at the same time. What I really like about this track is the fills, and I think also the way that I've placed them, and sometimes how they sort of come in a bit before. Like, I think it was perhaps on these plasma rifle leads, or is it on these? These are kind of like depth leads, I suppose. They sort of add, a bit of a middle ground. This is not what I was actually looking for, but yeah, this little part at the end, that sort of signifies the change a little bit, because it comes in quite sort of as a different sound. Oh, sorry about that. That sort of starts the setup to the second 16, because the second 16 is very, very different from the first 16. So I have to do a lot of work to get it to transition over in a smooth kind of way. That's why I have this kind of gap here as well, so to give the elements a chance to sort of change. There's a few different things that all sort of play at the same time there. But I guess that wasn't the actual sound I was looking for. I wanted to show you there's some kind of fills that I use. Yes, I think it's these Neuro Nanos. Is it these ones? Yeah, so if you listen in the first 16, it kind of is split into two halves, right? And so in the first half, it's just these kind of one shots with a lot of reverb and delay, and then on the second half, it goes into like a sort of special effect. Dum da 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 dum. This extra like da 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 da. Sounds a bit like the Imperial March, but yeah, it's got this you start to hear more of it and more sort of notes playing, and so to introduce that. What you can see is there's this little down just before we change over. That sort of initiates the change almost. It's a little bit of a precursor to the fact that element's going to change. So if you listen, it's it comes in just before dum dum, and then it goes into the new version. And that's just a little idea. Not idea. Sorry, what's the word? It's a little tip, but that's only on one layer. All of the layers sort of change and progress over time. But that's one way that you can make a layer sort of have a bit more of a feeling to the kind of narrative of it. So having this little offbeat stab before it sort of changes. So yeah, that's one cool thing that I sort of did in this track quite well. I think is the fills and sort of introducing the changes, just before, and like choosing sort of timings where it sort of throws you off on purpose. So that was that little thing that comes in just before. It's like it's not like a natural space for it to sort of fit the flow. It's sort of like what it does is it kind of disrupts the flow on purpose to let you know that it's about to change. That's basically what I'm trying to say in this long-winded point. So yeah, that's sort of something new I did compositionally that I haven't really done much before. But yeah, you see I've got a lot of different like groups. Like I've got this hi-hatchy group. And this has got this really nice sort of stuttery effect before the drop, I think, actually here. Yeah, and that they sort of all go into like final groups like leads or like all mids, so I can sort of control them all at the end. Because there's a lot of sounds like this where they're kind of like middle ground sort of sounds. Like there's this sort of majestic group. It's definitely more of a background at the moment, but these are kind of like my wind chimes and some real sort of instrumental sounds. And here on the drop, it's like a background part. But and then it changes there, and then it becomes sort of the lead. But it's sort of the same group of textures. So I've got this kind of like washed out, reverby, wind chimey part of the sound. Then I've got the actual like lead sort of music box kind of sound. But they all kind of, I think they're actually two different samples, but they all sort of fit into the same group in that kind of vibe. It's like that kind of, a bit mysterious, bit majestic, bit magical kind of sounds. Magic sounds, You can hear there's a bit of sort of fuzzy noise on top of that music box, and that's sort of to help it cut through the mix because it's a bit sort of too natural without it, above all the rest of the stuff. And I love this part here because what I did is, that I pretty much just changed the notes around. So, dum 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 dum, and then it goes. Dun, 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 dun. So I've just sort of changed one or two notes so it sort of starts higher and then goes lower, and that sort of change in halfway through that 16 is really cool. I think I love that. It was a bit difficult to find the right notes, but I think it kind of paid off. Yeah. And in this second 16 where I've got this sort of lead, it takes over the mid bass. So if we talk about the sort of main mid range, because we have to sort of prioritize what's the lead in each section. So in the first part is the Yoshimitsu Base, which is a previous video I did that kind of popped off a little bit on YouTube. I think it's got like 2,000 views or something now. I'll put a link to it upstairs in case you haven't seen it. But this is the Yoshimitsu Base that I made, which is on. Is it on a sample? I think it's on one of my previous sample pack Metabase. I think it's on there. Yeah, so that's my like main lead in a sense. Is the mid bass is the lead in the first 16. I'm sorry about that. Yeah, Logic always just crashes when the project starts to get full, I mean, it's a story of my life. I've had that problem for 10 years. Luckily, on this Mac Mini, it rarely happens now until right at the end of massive projects like this one, it starts to happen. So sorry, I won't edit that out because my wrist is still a bit sore, so I'm sort of doing everything with my left hand here. But yeah, just bear with me with that. But yeah, what I wanted to say was that I'm prioritizing the what's the lead in each section. So this part is the Yoshimitsu is the main lead. It's the mid bass. And then it becomes the majestic. That sort of becomes the lead in the next section here. I'm not sure what the hell is going on here. Something's just happened to like the drums. Oh, that's better. So in this section where the majestic sort of lead comes in, I've beefed up the low end with a sort of harmonic sub. So this is like an extra channel, and it's basically a kind of higher up sine wave with more movement on, which goes with the sub. So it's two. Got my low one in there, and also that higher sort of old school feeling harmonic sub. So just higher up sine waves with different movement on them, basically. And that sort of sits underneath the lead, you know. So where I've sort of had the Yoshimitsu mid bass sort of dominating the whole low mid range and like the top part of the mid range, it's sort of the whole main lead at that point. In this section, it's sort of a combination of that, the majestic lead filling out the sort of treble and the mid range, and then that sort of harmonic sub just beefing up the rest of the low end that's kind of missing from the music box. So we've got still a really, really full spectrum in the end. And you know, there's loads of background sounds in this track. That's why there's so many channels. So it's really, that's all the vibe and all the feeling, you know, after we've sort of made the mid basses and the leads and sort of chosen what we're prioritizing, put it to our drums, you know, made a nice rhythmic composition, nice melody. And once we've done all that, then it's all of the background sounds that really tell the story, and there's a lot of them. So I mean, I did put a lot of work into this. You know, you've got a dark wave. Is there anything there? No, not in this section. There's maybe some piano parts as well, even. Little piano risers. And little high-pitched piano sounds in the intro here. Yeah, I just wanted to do a little sneak peek today. I don't really have a structure for this video, but I think maybe... Oh yeah, I love this sound. This is kind of in the intro as well. This is the kind of main or only real human voice sort of sound. So it's just a sort of choir sample that I had, like a hum. And then that sort of plays throughout the track. So in the intro, it's like more prominent and you can hear it a bit louder with more low end in. But then it's still playing on the drop as well. It's just had the low end taken out. And these little impact points at the start, always, it's a combination of different impacts. So that's kind of only in the background. That's not really an impact. But this little hum, that's a sort of impact. And then I've got this Neuro Nano thing. So it's like this synthy splash. That's sort of doubling up with this. So, and then I think there might even be something else. See, that's a tension layer. That's just kind of always there in the background, sort of side chained. And so in the intro, I've got this kind of synthy lead that you hear. And the way that carries on is in the form of a tension layer. So I'm still using the same texture, just in a different way, and sort of filling it in the background. But yeah, it's hi-hatchy. It's a little hey. That's also an impact sound, a lot more in the background, but it's definitely adding up, you know, with these other two. So with the hum, the hey, and the the hum, hey, and the horse, and the synth. These three kind of impact sounds already. There's probably more, to be fair. Yeah, there's a little like cutthroat, like a knife stab kind of sound effect. There's nothing in there. Is there anything in here? Oh yeah, this is kind of more the like main mid-range bass at this point. It's just like a sort of mid-range synth, but that sort of couples up with everything as well on the impacts. So you know, we've got quite a lot going on for each sort of downbeat. So yeah, a lot of those will be sort of side chain to the kick a bit as well, because obviously the kick's still got to cut through first and foremost. So yeah, you can kind of see a little bit more about the different elements that make up the song, and it's a, you know, with all those background sounds, they're all like creating a soundscape in the end. the way that they sort of work together, it's the effect is that they create like a new soundscape, you know, because of the way they combine with each other. And so if we listen here, here I get into my sort of bridge section where it kind of, you know, all tails off towards the breakdown, and then I've got like a combination between this sort of stringed Spitfire Labs instrument, also with a synth at the same time, doing this dum dum dum. So it's a sort of double instrument of synth and guitar. Well, it's not really a guitar. It's like I don't know, a zither, a shamisen. No, not even that. I think it's like a lute. I think it's a lute. You can hear it sort of doesn't. The bassy synth part doesn't come in straight away. And if you listen closely as well, the beautiful thing about chopping reverb is the whole sound's got like a massive long reverb on, but it sort of chops off and then suddenly it's gone. So that's why I've sort of reverbed it and then chopped off the reverb in the gaps to create, you know, the space there. So it's like a bit of a. I remember listening to like Spectra Soul songs a while ago and listening to how they did that and thinking that was really cool. It's like almost an unnatural effect because you have a huge reverb on sound, but then suddenly you just chop it all off. So it's just like, oh, we're working with samples again. You know, it's kind of a little, drum and bass kind of technique. You know, but in that gap, you don't really notice that the reverb sort of chops off because I've filled up the space with all the other sounds. So like, you know, the impact sounds, they're all kind of there. But yeah, these like. I've got this like extra ARP. I've got these like wind chimes. I've got this hum choir bass. There's like loads of different sounds. It's a real movie in there, you know. That's kind of how I imagined it. I really got quite creative with the sound effects. Got the rain in there because I love like putting sound effects into my track. You know, I like to feel like it's like a movie in my head. That's what helps me stay motivated to want to finish it and make it interesting. You know, when I think of it, like imagine I'm Hans Zimmer making D&B. Obviously I'm not, but that's just like a little fantasy in my head while I'm producing. So that keeps it more fun. And I love the way that sort of that lute, you know, that kind of dry sort of guitar loop. It actually sort of starts off dry here, or drier, and then more reverb sort of comes in over time on like a new layer. And then I just sort of cut it off completely to start that kind of build up. But the loop kind of repeats, and then but everything else changes. So the ARP comes in, and then, you know, but that loop is still sort of there always, but it's just working differently with all the other instruments. Then at that point, suddenly, and that's what creates the, you know, creates the tension for the build up, even though the loop is still the same loop. You know, no, it's just everything else around it has changed. And all I've done here is just a mashup of all of the instruments from the drop, redone again, just in a faster kind of composition. So I've chopped up the Yoshimitsu Base. It sort of repeats itself a bit more faster, and then everything sort of just condenses and repeats itself a little quicker and quicker over time. So it gets quite hectic, and then these little percussions come in the second half. can kind of not hear them that much on their own in the mix, but they definitely sort of add up the tension. And they're the one thing that I probably wish I would have boosted before I sort of published the track a little bit more. So, because there's always one thing. There's always one thing that I sort of forgot to do or wish I did. And in this case, it was this little percussion group here. I would have boosted them a little bit so you can hear them come in a bit louder. But they definitely still add to the feeling. It's just I wanted to hear them a bit more. And then at the end here, what the actual main change is I bring in this kind of old school break. I don't know if you can quite hear it. I can't remember which break it was, but yeah, it's that break. If you know what it is, comment down below. It's kind of classic break, but I sort of took out some of the kicks and then sort of just EQ'd it and reverbed it, and then everything sort of fades down towards the end. You know, things start to filter down. And while some things filter down, I leave some things sort of open. So, for example, this last little splash of lead sounds really nice with all this high end on it because everything else is filtered out, and so you start to sort of hear that high end a bit more on that lead. Yeah, the nice little simple outro, just picking a few of my favourite sort of soundscape bits to sort of tell the ending to the story. Yeah, so that was a little demonstration video, a little insight into my project, Eremite, and I didn't want to like I could open up the groups and there'd be loads more sounds to look at, but we'd literally be talking for hours about it because there's so much going on, and it's just a bit of a crazy insight into the way that my head works. But although it looks and sounds complicated, I'm using very, very simple understanding of composition to get everything to work. You know, and a lot of these extra sounds, they're like really, really background sounds or middle ground sounds where, you know, they're really low in the mix and they're like EQ'd out with EQ'd the low end out, so I know they're not conflicting. And then, you know, we'll group them up and just sidechain them all to the kick or the snare or whatever if I feel like I'm using too many sounds. But, you know, because I'm good at placing them in the background, I'm not worried about clogging up the mix because I know that they're just going to be right at the back there, so they're not really going to mess up with my main mid-range star for that particular section, and also the kick and snare, which are going to be ruthlessly cutting through everything anyway. So I don't get too sort of worried about that you have to have that many sounds or that it becomes complicated, because it's just fundamental mixing techniques that allow you to be able to be that creative, really. And yeah, the more creative you can be and get it to sort of fit together and work, the more unique the song is going to sound. But don't let that discourage you from doing something really minimal or simple with less layers, because that's also just as good. You know, for example, Grey, I definitely didn't use as many sounds for that, and that's just as much of a banger, maybe even more so. So it's just different strokes for different folks, really. Anyway, thanks for watching the video. If you like what I do and you support my content, make sure you subscribe if you haven't already, because I know a lot of people just watch but don't subscribe, but it really helps me out if you do. And check out the links down below to my sample pack. And yeah, come along and join Discord, where you also get a nice discount on my mentorship. And yeah, don't do anything I wouldn't.